It was the kind of morning where the mist hung in the air like a heavy blanket, and every breath you took felt like you were inhaling the forest itself. Officer Clara Vaughn stood at the edge of the woods behind Morrow Creek, hands wrapped around the straps of her utility belt, her fingers brushing the cold metal of her flashlight as she checked her watch. It was barely 6 a.m., but she had already been awake for hours, the gnawing, familiar knot of anxiety tightening in her stomach. Missing persons calls were never easy, but this one felt different. Beside her, Oaks, her 4-year-old Belgian Malinois, sat perfectly still, his coat still damp from the morning dew. His amber eyes scanned the treeline, his posture rigid, alert. Oaks wasn't just a dog. He was her partner, the one who had helped her through some of the hardest moments in her life. He had a mind of his own, a sharp, focused mind that had made him legendary in their department. But he also had a stubborn streak. They'd had their fair share of disagreements. Oaks was never the obedient, textbook dog. But over time, Clara had come to understand that Oaks wasn't just disobedient. He was thorough, almost obsessively so, and that's what had made him stand out. Clara scratched behind his ears gently. "Another Sunday ruined, huh? Boy," she murmured, and Oaks leaned into the touch for a moment before returning his focus to the woods. He was ready for whatever was out there. The woods behind Morrow Creek weren't the kind of place you'd expect to find trouble. Sure, hikers occasionally got lost, and the local birdwatchers liked to sit, but that was about it. The area was peaceful, thick with pines, the kind of place where people could escape the noise of the world. So when the call about Curtis Broom had come in, it had caught everyone off guard. Curtis was a handyman in his late 40s, a quiet man who had kept to himself. But there was one thing: he always showed up to his sister's house every Sunday morning without fail. And then, he didn't. Not this time. The night before, his sister had called, her voice shaking as she described how Curtis never missed their breakfast tradition. 15 years, she said. Rain or shine, Curtis shows up at my kitchen table at 8:30 sharp. The search and rescue team had been dispatched, thinking it was just a simple case. Maybe he had twisted an ankle or gotten lost while hiking. But when his beaten-up Ford pickup was found parked at the entrance to Trail 9B, the keys sitting on the dashboard, his cell phone dead in the glove compartment, something didn't add up. Commander Weston, a veteran with silver hair and the kind of face that told you he'd seen too much, had called Clara directly. She could hear the tension in his voice. There was something in the air, a sense that this might be more than a simple missing person case. Clara had been partnered with Oaks for 3 years, ever since she transferred to search and rescue from patrol. It hadn't been an easy transition. Losing Rex, her pre-VYS partner, to cancer had nearly shattered her. But Oaks had brought her back. His unflinching focus, his drive to keep going when everyone else thought it was hopeless, it reminded her why she had fallen in love with K9 work in the first place. When she clipped on Oaks's harness, letting him sniff Curtis's shirt, she watched as Oaks transformed from a playful, energetic dog to a saw-saw, laser-focused professional saw-saw. He was on the scent, and she could tell, by the way he moved, that he knew exactly what they were dealing with. They moved deeper into the woods, Oaks pulling Clara through thick underbrush, the damp earth crunching beneath her boots. They moved with purpose, Oaks guiding her like a trusted navigator. "Let him work," Weston called to the team, his voice calm but knowing. Weston had seen Oaks's abilities firsthand, and he had learned to trust the dog's instincts. Oaks had solved cases that had stumped human investigators, and that was why Clara didn't question him. She just followed. About 40 minutes in, Clara noticed a change in the terrain. The canopy above thickened, blocking out the early morning sunlight, casting the forest floor in a shadowy twilight. The air felt different, heavy, and saw there was an unfamiliar scent, saw pine mixed with something else, something that made the hair on the back of her neck stand up. Oaks paused, his body going still. His hackles rose slightly. It wasn't the full alert she was used to, but it was enough to signal that something wasn't right. Oaks slowly stalked forward, his steps deliberate. He veered toward a slope lined with gnarled tree roots, their claws scraping at the earth like skeletal fingers. Clara had learned to read Oaks like a book. She could tell by the way his ears twitched, the tension in his shoulders, the careful placement of each paw that they were getting close to something. And then, Oak stopped dead in his tracks. The forest opened up before them, and Clara found herself standing in the center of a natural ring, tall fir trees forming a protective arc overhead. In the middle, Oak sat down with an eerie stillness, his eyes fixed on a massive, hollowed-out tree in the center of the clearing. The tree was ancient, its trunk rotting and blackened, creating an opening that gaped like a mouth. Clara frowned, her flashlight cutting through the darkness of the trunk. She could feel the tension building, the unspoken dread. She called back to Weston, who had been trailing behind with a couple of team members. "That's not normal behavior, she said, her voice tight with caution. "What's he looking at?" Weston asked, his voice low and grave as he approached. And that's when Oakes did something that made Clara's blood run cold. A growled. A deep rumble she had only ever heard from him twice before. Both times, when they had found human remains. Clara's heart pounded in her chest. She slowly approached the tree, flashlight in hand, her instincts screaming at her to stop. She shone the light inside, cutting through the darkness. And there it was. Inside the hollow, wrapped in what looked like an old tarp, was a saw human arm saw, severed cleanly at the elbow. The fingers were curled unnaturally, and a piece of saw linen saw was tied around the wrist. It had been marked with a saw symbol saw, a crude triangle intersecting a circle with a jagged slash through it, drawn in what looked like blood. Clara recoiled, almost dropping her flashlight. "Jesus Christ," she whispered, her hands shaking as she pulled back from the tree. Weston was silent for a moment. Then his voice came out hoarse. "Get back up here. Full forensics team. Close off all the trails. Nobody else comes in here until we figure out what we're dealing with." As the team secured the area, Oakes remained perfectly still, watching the hollow with an intensity that suggested he knew this was just the beginning. The rain began to fall, slowly at first, but then harder, adding to the eerie feeling of the scene. Minutes later, backup arrived, and the saw red and blue lights saw flickered through the trees, painting the forest in surreal colors. The forensic team began working, documenting every detail, but Clara noticed something. Oakes was becoming restless again. He kept lifting his head, his ears rotating, sniffing the air like he was picking up something else. Something new. "You're getting something else, aren't you?" Clara asked softly, her heart sinking. Oakes confirmed her fears when he suddenly bolted forward, dragging her through the forest at an unrelenting pace. She had no choice but to follow, calling back to Weston as they disappeared deeper into the woods. "Where are you going?" Weston shouted. "I don't know," Clara called back. "But I'm not letting him go alone." Oakes led them through the thick undergrowth, his nose down, moving with an urgency that Clara had never seen from him before. They pushed on, taking them 60 meters away from the first tree, toward another ancient oak. This one, however, had a dark, peeling bark and seemed to exude an oppressive presence. Oakes circled the tree, then lowered his body, pressing his nose against the ground in that unmistakable stance that meant he had found something. Clara approached with her flashlight, and saw what Oakes had found: a pair of severed feet saw, still wearing faded purple socks, bound at the ankles with rope, wrapped in the same canvas-like material. It was a pattern now, a saw ritual saw, and it was becoming clear. "This isn't random dumping," Clara said, her voice trembling as she turned to Weston. "Someone staged this. They wanted us to find it." The rest of the day was a blur of discoveries: more human remains, more symbols carved into the trees, each find leading them deeper into a network of meticulously planned ritualistic murders. But it was the discovery of a saw photograph saw of a young woman, laughing on a park bench that changed everything. This is a promise, Clara realized. Someone is planning their next move. And with that realization, the hunt took on an entirely different urgency. The killer was Saw watching Saw them. He had been preparing for this moment for a long time, and he wanted them to find his ritual,